Spring break in the Caribbean. Warm waters, neon lights, and a kind of freedom that feels endless. For most, it's a fleeting escape. But for one young woman, it became the last place she was ever seen. On a quiet stretch of sand in Punta Cana, as dawn crept over the horizon, a 20-year-old student from the University of Pittsburgh vanished without a trace. Clothes left behind, stories that don't quite align, and a search that has raised more questions than answers. This is the story of that island, that spring break, and that student. This is the story of Sudiksha Konanki. Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Aishwarya.
And I'm Aryaan.
And the case that I have for you today is one that took the world by storm in March of 2025.
Aishwarya, if I'm not wrong, this is the case where CCTV footage of this girl's final moments were going viral on Instagram and TikTok.
This is the one. And what's creepy about those final moments is that even though there are cameras all over the resort, all over the places of the island, restaurants, the beach, whatnot, nothing captures anything after that last walk to the beach. And so it creates so many questions.
I think some of the creepiest cases and crime documentaries I've seen are the ones where the final moments of people are captured. Cases like where I remember the one where this kid was caught dashing through an airport and never seen again after that. It happened in the US. So these cases tickle my fancy like no other. And we have something special for you guys. Apart from the Desi Crime book, which is out now, you can get it wherever you want. We're signing the book everywhere, but that's not the special announcement.
Something new.
The special announcement is that while we want you to buy the Desi Crime book, and you got to spend money for that, not a lot, 350, 300 rupees, what we have for you today is free. You can get 48 hours early access to all Desi Crime episodes for the month of October only on the Amazon Music app. All you have to do, Aishwarya, is download the Amazon Music app.
And this is usually a perk only available to our paid members, our Patreon members, our YouTube members who subscribe monthly, pay a fee and get it. And we always promote that. So go become a member to help turn these wheels. But if you can't and you still want that crazy early access for a whole month for free, go download the Amazon Music app.
Comes free with your Prime membership. And now on with this weird, mysterious case.
On March 6, 2025, the first light of day spread across the Caribbean sky as the spring break crowds in Punta Cana began to wind down. For a group of University of Pittsburgh students, the trip had been an escape, a chance to swap textbooks and late-night labs for beaches, music, and the promise of a week without responsibility. They had checked into the Hotel Rio Republica, one of the area's busiest all-inclusive resorts, and quickly slipped into the rhythm of sun-drenched afternoons and long nights on the dance floor. That night, the celebration that had begun on the evening of the 5th had slipped into the early morning hours of March 6th. Surveillance cameras inside the resort captured the students. 6 women and 2 men leaving the hotel bar with drinks in hand, walking towards the beach late into the night. The women, 20-year-old Sudiksha Konanki and her friends Nitya Venkat, Ananya Chilakamari, Shaleen Bordavekar, Shivani Vishwanathan and Komal Karim Charyan had been inseparable since freshman year. To them, this trip was meant to be a celebration of endurance, of surviving another punishing semester of pre-med and engineering courses back in Pittsburgh. In their group that night was also a young American man named Joshua Ribe and Joshua's friend Carter Johnson. But none of them in that moment could have imagined just how central this one man, Joshua, would become to the story that was about to unfold. As the night continued on, by sometime between 4:15 and 5 a.m. though, the party began to scatter from the beach. While 6 women and 2 men had been caught on CCTV cameras heading to the beach, surveillance cameras this time showed only 5 women and 1 man heading back towards the hotel around 5 a.m. Sudiksha and Joshua were the only 2 who remained behind on the sand. Still, only a normal spring break night out. But when the resort stirred awake hours later and staff began setting out breakfast buffets, her friends noticed Sudiksha still hadn't returned to their room. At first, they brushed it off, thinking she had crashed elsewhere after the long night. But as the hours passed, the explanations no longer made sense.
Again, Aishwarya, I mean, we experienced the concept of a spring break when we studied in the US.
Right.
And while we like to think that we experience spring in India. It's not exactly spring. Right. It's like this transition period. But spring in America after winter, where it's snowing.
That late February, March period, depending on the state you're in.
That 1 week the college gives you off is a designated party week. Right?
Yeah.
And so for somebody to not come back from a party is probably more normal
than it is not.
Than it is not.
Correct.
So I can completely understand why the friends were like, she's probably gone out with the Joshua fella. Like that would have been my conclusion.
And for those of you who don't quite understand the spring break concept because you're not familiar with it, it's not just that it's these 5 students and all students from the University of Pittsburgh that are experiencing spring break at this point. It's most likely all the hundreds of colleges in that geography because they're all going through spring together.
There are certain towns and beach towns that are known to be visitor unfriendly during spring break because they are swarmed by
with
students.
American students.
You don't want to be there as a family with those students.
Right. So it's completely normal that she may have met someone new, someone she knew from back in school, a friend she made because they're also American students. It's not her and a bunch of other Caribbeans. It's her and a lot of other Americans. But like I said, the longer the hours went on, the less her having just stayed out for the whole night made sense. Her clothes were untouched, her phone was missing, and no one had seen her. Growing uneasy, Komal, one of her friends from the group, decided to do something. She went straight to Joshua's room and knocked on his door. "Have you seen Sudiksha?" she asked. His answer, that he hadn't seen her since early in the morning, cut through whatever denial still lingered in Komal's mind. By mid-afternoon, panic was full-blown. The group had searched the resort grounds and called the front desk. With no sign of their friend, fear hardened into something scarier. And so at around 4 p.m., they officially reported Sudiksha missing to the hotel staff. At 5:43 p.m., her father, thousands of miles away in Virginia in the United States, filed his own missing persons report with the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office, the county where they resided and had their home. What had begun as a spring break escape had now shifted into the start of a nightmare. But before this nightmarish night ever came to be, long before her name blazed across headlines, Sudiksha Konanki was a bright, determined young woman navigating 2 worlds. Born on December 13, 2004 in India, she immigrated to the United States with her parents, Subarayudu and Sridevi Konanki, when she was a toddler. The family settled in South Riding, Virginia, a leafy suburb outside Washington, D.C., where Sudiksha and her younger siblings grew up straddling their Telugu heritage and the suburban American experience. Classical Indian dance lessons followed by soccer practice, biryani dinners and pizza nights. From the start though, she excelled academically. She attended Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, one of the most competitive public magnet schools in the country. Now for all of you and Aryaan, a question: where have we talked about magnet schools before?
Where have we talked about magnet? I was about to ask you, what's a magnet school?
That just shows how much attention he pays to our stories. But magnet schools are these really specific schools which have specifically designed curriculum for kids to excel in STEM, the arts, whatever. And they attract usually very high excelling students, specifically very diverse population of students. So a lot of Pakistani, Indian, like Asian, Chinese immigrant students go to these magnet schools. And the case where we've covered this before, where the victim and the alleged perpetrator also were in a very competitive magnet school, was the Adnan Saeed case, where Hemant and Adnan were both in a really competitive Baltimore magnet school. Friends remember her as disciplined but adventurous, equally comfortable dissecting a frog in biology class as she was choreographing a dance routine for the school's cultural show. After graduating high school, she enrolled at the University of Pittsburgh, studying biology and chemistry with dreams of becoming a doctor one day. At Pitt, she joined clubs that fostered both her Indian heritage and her commitment to healthcare. She volunteered at free clinics and tutored other students struggling in their STEM courses. And her parents back home in Virginia were proud of her ambition. Yet they also worried. America had become her home, yet they understood she was an immigrant and she would always navigate questions of belonging. This worry had reared its head when Sudiksha called home in early March to tell them she was heading to the Dominican Republic with 5 friends for spring break. "Be careful," her mother had been sure to remind her. Sudiksha laughed, promising to call every day. She never imagined those would be some of the last words she'd share with her parents. But you see, Sudiksha wasn't wrong in assuming that all would be well on the trip. Punta Cana is sold as a dreamscape, swaying palm trees, turquoise waters, and sweeping stretches of white sand-lined beaches with all-inclusive resorts that rise like polished fortresses along the coast.
Aishwarya, I have a knack for sliding in a note
travel
about...
Story,
travel
yes.
story.
Travel story alert.
This is less travel story, more travel story context
Sure.
to help you understand this better. Although maybe it's just a flex. I don't mean to. But I was in the Bahamas recently in a very similar resort. A friend's mom took us there. Shout out Denise.
Good Denise.
And while these countries themselves might be developing countries, they might not have the strongest economies. When you're going to one of these resorts, you got to understand you are almost in a different country.
Right.
You barely leave the resort. I don't remember leaving the resort once, even though I was like, oh, I'll see what the locals live like. Because of the amenities of these resorts.
Right.
You spend all your time in these private beaches, in these super safe environments, billion-dollar hotels.
Yeah.
So it is completely okay to assume you are safe.
Yeah.
Whether you're a woman or a man in a hotel like this, you are not interacting with the locals
That's
or
right.
on the streets late at night. You're in a very safe space.
And that's why sometimes it's also recommended that there are some cities that are spring break popular, vacation popular, that are down south of the US, where they actually just recommend that you stay inside the resort, even though the overall area is a little bit unsafe. I remember thinking of going to Cancun back when I was in my second year. Never ended up going. But all that I kept reading online was that Cancun's really safe, like a lot of these Mexican cities, very safe, as long as you're in these all-inclusive resorts. Don't really step out and venture. But that image that we just described hides another side. Beneath the sunlit facade lie deeper questions about security, inequality, and the cost of a tourism boom. The Dominican Republic has leaned heavily on its beaches to power its economy, and Punta Cana sits at the center of that gamble. Resorts and tourism infrastructure get the lion's share of investment. Security guards, surveillance systems, controlled perimeters, while the areas beyond them can be far more precarious. In recent months, the US State Department has flagged the country under a level 2 travel advisory, warning that violent crime, including robbery, homicide, and sexual assault, remain a concern even in tourist areas. Criminals are often under-prosecuted, and the advisory specifically cautions against flashing valuables or isolating oneself. In recent years, many tourists have become part of this darker undercurrent. In fact, in January 2025, just weeks before Sudiksha's disappearance, 4 European tourists drowned off the beach near the very resort where she vanished. Only one body was recovered. Now, spring break, imagine, turns all of this into fuel, with hundreds of people flocking there, thousands sometimes. As winter fades, Punta Cana becomes a magnet. Sun-starved students chase cheap drinks, nightlife, and a sanctuary from their routines. The resorts swell. The fences and cameras should insulate them. But when the night deepens and cameras blur, that boundary between paradise and danger can grow thin. But nobody ever thinks they'd be the center of the next tragedy. And so, carefree and fearless, Sudiksha and her friends arrived in Punta Cana on March 3rd, 2025, buzzing with excitement. They snapped selfies in the lobby, compared bikini collections, and noted the resort's lush gardens and seemingly endless buffet. But in the early hours of March 5th, a power outage swept through Rio Republica. The lights went out at 1:27 a.m. and remained largely off until 2:13 a.m. the next day. Guests stumbled through dark hallways using their phone flashlights. For a resort that boasted about safety, the blackout felt ominous. That morning, after some of the lights came back on, the party resumed though, as if nothing had happened. By March 5th, the students had settled into spring break's late-night cadence. Drinks, music, and the sea's hush in between. At the lobby bar inside the resort that night, Sudiksha met Joshua Ribe, a 22-year-old student from St. Cloud State University in Minnesota. Tall, blonde, and athletic, he'd worked as a lifeguard in high school. He and his friend Carter Johnson, also 22, were on a separate spring break trip. A security camera captured Joshua and Sudiksha leaning against each other at the bar at around 3 a.m. as they downed tequila shots, laughed, and leaned in closer as the night went on. Then, at around 4:15 a.m., the group headed towards the beach. CCTV footage from this walk towards the beach is what Aryaan mentioned that became insanely popular, would go on to become the last clear sightings of Sudiksha alive. In the video later released by investigators, Sudiksha, 5'3" with long black hair and warm brown eyes, can be seen having what by all accounts was a normal spring break night with her friends, as she mingled maybe a little bit extra with Joshua, walking hand in hand. Despite having only met hours earlier, in the footage she looks relaxed. A brown bikini against her skin, a metal anklet clinging on her right leg, and a beaded bracelet wrapped around her left wrist. As the group reached the beach, the night carried on with more drinking and more laughter. With the rest of the group, they downed more tequila shots and moved closer to the water slowly, the ocean deceptively calm in the dark hours before dawn. The friends discarded shoes, tossed their clothes, and some went in for a dip too. But in the hours that followed, many of them drifted back towards the hotel, confirmed by cameras that counted 5 women and 1 man walking back. Not Sudiksha and Joshua though, with the cameras not clearly showing what happened on the beach after that. It's unknown to this day whether cameras even covered their final stretch or if blind spots intervened. Everything that happened from this point onwards is known only through Joshua's account, as translated and reported to prosecutors, which is chilling in its uncertainty.
When you say translated, you mean the Dominican authorities needed a translator to get his testimony as to what happened?
That's right. So Joshua had an English translator that was then translating to
Dominican
the people
or the
in
language.
local,
Yeah. So that, I mean, I don't know how good the translator the police
that
forces
is always
had
a question,
there,
yeah.
But a lot can get lost in translation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then it's almost as if whether or not that translation is correct, you need like another person to verify that.
It becomes a case of Chinese whispers.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, not always.
Not always, yeah.
But those Chinese whispers can, if the fundamental testimony, right, and when that is the only thing there is, has Chinese whispers, small deviations of a few minutes here or there, or some steps here or there, can, if misinterpreted from the get-go, direct the investigation in a way that would be off the center.
In fact, we've all experienced this when we're watching a show on Netflix or whatever, and we're watching something dubbed, and we'll say that the way they phrase this sentence, only 2 words are different, but it means something completely different in my language. Like, this is not what they were trying to say, you know, when you're showing it to someone else. So I can't even imagine when translations are so important to a story where it's a matter of literal innocence, life behind bars, or, you know, you being proven free. Yeah. It must be wild.
Do we know anything that did get mistranslated?
We don't know.
Okay.
So like I said, everything we know from now on is only through Joshua's kind of uncertain accounts. He claims that once the friends left, he and Sudiksha entered the water where a powerful wave quickly knocked them off balance, dragging them further into the surf than they intended. As they struggled back, he said he had Sudiksha under his arm, trying to swim towards the shore. He says he coughed up seawater, tried to steady himself, and by the time they touched shallow sand, the exhaustion was overwhelming. He maintains the last moment he remembers is asking Sudiksha if she was okay. Quote, "The last time I saw her," he told investigators, "I asked if she was okay. I didn't hear her answer because I started vomiting all the seawater I had swallowed." End quote. But he claims he clearly saw her as she walked away from the sea towards the edge of the beach to gather their belongings. Moments later, Joshua says, he passed out on a beach chair under the stars, and by the time he awoke hours later at 8 a.m. because of mosquitoes buzzing around him, she was gone. He said he walked back to his friend's room to get his phone and then returned to his own room to sleep, with CCTV cameras confirming that he left the beach at exactly 8:55 a.m., 4 hours after the others had left. Joshua would later insist that he assumed Sudiksha had gone back to her room and that he only learned she was missing when Sudiksha's friend Komal asked if he'd seen her. He claimed he was, quote, really tired from the previous night and hadn't noticed her absence earlier. When Sudiksha's friends finally reported her missing just a while after this conversation with Joshua, hotel staff initially thought she had simply stayed out all night, not uncommon for young tourists like we discussed. But their tone shifted when they did a small search and saw that her phone, clothes, and a room key were still on the beach bed where she'd left them before entering the water with Joshua. That afternoon, the resort contacted local authorities, but according to the Dominican National Police, they first learnt of Sudiksha's disappearance on Friday, March 7th at 8 a.m. after receiving a telephone call from the US Embassy. By then, nearly 24 hours had passed. Why this lapse happened, what caused it, and who should take responsibility for it, we don't quite know. But the search that followed from this point on was both massive and muddled. Drones, helicopters, boats, divers, and canine units combed the coastline and nearby waters, while police divided the beach into sectors and assigned drones to fly specific patterns, while AI software analyzed video for any sign of a body. Sudiksha's clothes were recovered near where she'd been seen, but there were no signs of a struggle or blood on or near them. Volunteers walked the shoreline, turning over seaweed and driftwood, after which the search extended to the resort's grounds, surrounding jungle and neighboring beaches. Local fishermen were alerted in case her body washed up elsewhere. In the meantime, back in Virginia, friends and classmates held vigils, praying for a safe return. Her parents pleaded with anyone who might know something to come forward. When no new discovery was made by March 10th, Dominican authorities sharpened their investigation. They announced they were re-interviewing everyone who had been with Sudiksha that night and combing through hours of surveillance footage. Hotel employees, bartenders, even cleaning staff were questioned. But the boldest step was taken with Joshua Ribe. His passport was confiscated, and for the next 10 days he was told he could not leave the island. And there was a reason why this happened. You see, the one question police couldn't answer, the one question that lingered on their mind, was what happened in the interim, in that time after Joshua claims to have pulled her out of the water and before he woke up the next morning. Did Sudiksha fall behind? Did she call out for help? Did she attempt to swim further? Did she collapse before returning? Did someone else come into the scene? There is no clear footage capturing her in motion after that moment, nor definitive witness statements from the remaining friends that fill every gap. So this scene, this last slice of life we can trace, is weighted with ambiguity.
Now, okay, I have questions in my mind that I'm sure the listeners would be thinking of right now, right? Because, of course, when whoever is the last person to have seen the missing person, the police always makes them suspect number one, and for good reason.
That last person theory, yeah.
Yeah, the last person theory. Now, I'm trying to figure out whether I want to trust Joshua or not. Mm-hmm. It was 5 in the morning, roughly, 5 a.m. Yeah. They were having tequila shots and they were drinking, they were partying. Right. So clearly he's intoxicated. We know that for a fact.
Yeah.
We also know, according to his testimony, that he was drowning.
That's right.
And he vomited
so
salt water.
Yeah.
Which means that whatever his memories are to be taken with all the grains of salt in that seawater.
Sure.
Yeah. So there is that side of this, right? Where without bad intention, his testimony might be muddled because he just might remember it incorrectly or may not remember it at all. That's number one. The second thing that stands out to me right now is that her clothes were in folded piles where she had kept it, and her phone was also there. But according to Joshua, when they came out of the water, he saw her go to those clothes.
The belongings.
So I would assume, if his testimony is right, which I'm saying let's be circumspect about, the clothes shouldn't have been in the same place, nor the phone. It should have moved at least.
Another weird detail to add to this is the fact that in this first story that he gives to the police, Joshua says he himself crashed on the beach beds where the clothes were. So he and Sudiksha, allegedly by his own account, have both walked towards the beach beds, maybe a little like time apart. Maybe Joshua crashed first, then managed to pick himself up and walk. And then he assumed that by that point Sudiksha's gone. But then those clothes, her phone, everything is still there. Yeah. Then maybe he's so drunk he just didn't notice all of that there. But there are also added to this is the fact that Joshua Ribe was a certified lifeguard in the US.
Yes.
This,
but that does align with him trying to rescue a stranger. If she truly was drowning, and he too was, he did rescue her.
He did try to save her in this account, yeah.
And in this account, he saved her successfully.
Correct.
One last thing before we get on with it, because my brain is just running with all possible theories right now. Another thing is that no person, if they have drowned, will voluntarily re-enter the water.
Yeah, 100%.
That impossible
Unless
to me.
What he's trying to imply, or what the police is trying to speculate, is that he wasn't able to pull her far enough. The waves were that strong that night. The tides were that bad.
Yeah.
That she was also drunk. Just like Joshua collapsed right after coming out, maybe she also collapsed and the waves swept her.
Yeah, but then
again.
In that case, the lifeguard thing is very important.
And in that case, the whole saw her walking her...
That doesn't make sense, obviously.
Make any
but
sense.
If you're a lifeguard, your reflexes kick in where you will save that person no matter what.
Yeah, I think so
And
too.
you will at least bring them to the shore where they're not swept back again.
Also, there is something to be said about the fact that there is a certain level of drunk that is obviously so bad that you're completely out of your senses.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of points before that at which the adrenaline from almost drowning will completely make you sober. And there are friends of mine who've had this experience. In fact, recently one had this experience where she was pretty drunk. She had a friend with her who was pretty drunk. And this friend out in the parking lot after a night out suddenly her blood pressure started dropping and so became really dizzy and was about to pass out. And this friend recounts that story saying the moment I saw this happen to her, it was like I was completely sober in like 5 seconds flat. That is also something that could have happened.
Sure.
That didn't.
One last thing to add to this is that a third theory, and I'm just laying it all out, so as you get into this, I might whittle it down and pick one, is what if she did walk towards her clothes or she was fine in terms of being back on land, and then she passed out on the beach, and as the day progressed, the low tide or the high tide, whatever it is, swept her in as she was unconscious.
But didn't sweep away the clothes or the phone?
No, because she might have just passed out on the beach as opposed to the chair where the clothes were kept. So I'm just laying those out.
Yeah. All of these questions we've just raised, this fleeting moment in time, these few hours, is what the police couldn't figure out. It's that moment where laughter, water, darkness and uncertainty have collided and where the camera's eyes have turned away too soon. But what creates even more unanswered questions is the fact that the story of those last moments that we get from Joshua, there's not one single version to it. Early into the investigation, Joshua had given investigators multiple accounts of what happened that night, and the contradictions were hard for everyone, including me, to ignore. In one version, the one we've recounted, Joshua says a strong wave pulled both of them into the water. He claims he swam with Sudiksha under his arm until he was exhausted, coughed up seawater, and finally reached shallow surf. He remembers asking if she was okay, but says he never heard her answer. According to him, she walked away to gather their belongings while he collapsed into a chair and passed out. But in another version, Joshua drops the rescue detail, which to Aryaan was so important. He says he left her standing in knee-deep water, assumed she went off on her own, and doesn't remember anything more.
But then he leaves her in knee-deep water, and then he says he vomits a whole bunch of seawater, and in the meantime, she disappears. So he manages to get himself out of the water, but he doesn't get the woman who's apparently in danger of drowning out of the water. That doesn't make any sense.
And then there's a third version. In that one, Sudiksha herself says she's going to fetch their clothes scattered by the waves. Joshua insists those were her last words before he lay down, too weak to follow, and fell asleep under the stars. 3 stories, 3 conflicting accounts. Which, if any, is the truth? Dominican attorney Felix Portes, who has examined Joshua's statements, called them, quote, illogical. How could he lose sight of her in the surf, then lie down to sleep without searching? In one version, he's a rescuer. In another, he leaves her behind. In the last, she simply walks off into the dark. All while friends, the very people she had travelled across continents with, were only just steps ahead, already back under the safety of resort lights. His story raised questions for locals and other vacationers too. Guests on the beach that night told local reporters that the surf was rough but manageable. Why would 2 healthy swimmers be unable to stay together in knee-deep water? Why didn't Joshua report her missing immediately or even in the morning once he awoke? Those questions were complicated by the fact that Joshua initially cooperated with investigators, handing over his phone and submitting to interviews, but soon after, upon his lawyer's advice, he stopped answering questions. This silence fed internet speculation that he had something to hide. This is why, even though prosecutors insisted Joshua was only a witness, in reality he was placed under de facto house arrest at the Rio Republica. He could move about the resort grounds, but nowhere beyond, with security closely watching.
Sounds like the judge has said that he's being unlawfully detained, but that maybe there's a question as to who exactly has his passport.
For more than a week, he was interrogated multiple times, including by the Dominican Republic's Attorney General herself, Yenny Berenice Reynoso, who personally questioned him in marathon sessions. That confinement quickly became a flashpoint. Legal commentators inside the Dominican Republic warned that detaining someone for so long without charges risked violating constitutional protections. US lawyers watching from afar drew comparisons to unlawful detention cases, calling it a troubling precedent if a witness could be treated like a suspect. On social media, opinions split sharply. Some argued the hold was justified. After all, Joshua was the last person seen alive with Sudiksha. Others insisted he was being made a scapegoat, punished for proximity rather than evidence. Within the Indian diaspora, frustration ran deep. Many wondered if authorities would let the one person who might hold answers slip through their fingers. And those fears, justified or unjustified, came true on March 18th when his attorneys filed a writ of habeas corpus claiming his detention was unlawful. The following day, a judge agreed. While acknowledging the sensitivity of the case, the court ruled that Joshua's rights had been violated, that he could not be held indefinitely as a witness. Technically, he still remained bound to cooperate with the investigation, but in practice, the ruling to let him out of house arrest broke the police's hold over him. Within hours, Joshua secured an emergency passport from the US consulate and boarded a flight home with his father. To many, the speed of his departure was jarring too. 10 days under watch, interrogated at the highest levels, and then suddenly gone. Dominican officials stressed he was still part of the case, but to those watching from abroad, it felt like the one man who could explain Sudiksha's last night had gone. And so the debates only grew louder. Was this a victory for due process or a failure of justice? In the gap between those two interpretations, Sudiksha Konanki remained missing. Despite what seemed like a huge international headline-making case with mounting pressure, there were also jurisdictional complexities from the start that caused mass confusion. Sudiksha was an Indian citizen, not an American one, but a permanent US resident whose disappearance had occurred in the Dominican Republic, a country with its own legal processes. The Loudoun County Sheriff's Office in Virginia offered assistance but had no authority to conduct investigations on foreign soil.
Because when this first happened, we reached out immediately to our counterparts down there to work with the Dominican authorities, and that's what we have to do. We don't really have any jurisdiction outside of Loudoun County.
Interpol issued a yellow notice for missing persons, alerting agencies worldwide. Yet on the ground, it was the much smaller and far less equipped Dominican authorities that held power and control. As the search with this confusing backdrop dragged on with no new clues, theories proliferated. Some wondered if Sudiksha had been the victim of human trafficking. Rumors circulated online about organ harvesting. A TikTok video purporting to show her drowning went viral before being debunked. Investigators confirmed the clip was filmed in Russia, not the Dominican Republic. Others noted the eerie similarities between Sudiksha's case and the Natalie Holloway disappearance in Aruba in 2005. Natalie was another young woman who vanished while on a Caribbean vacation. In both cases, the last person seen with the victim was a male tourist who claimed to have left them on the beach. And then, on March 18th, 12 days after Sudiksha vanished, just 12 days, and with the search yielding nothing, came a gut-wrenching development that confused so many across the world. Sudiksha's parents publicly expressed their belief that their daughter had drowned and asked Dominican authorities to declare her legally dead.
What? The kingdom does with deep sawdust and it's very in the we heard that they're coming to the terms with the stars that our daughter has done. Who says incredible with the difficult for us to process. We kindly ask you to keep our daughter.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't know this about this case. This is the thing that struck people the most.
Why? I mean, yeah, why?
We're getting into some explanations, but what do you think? Is there any reason you can come up with why one would do this?
I mean, I can think of two, and I don't mean to cast any aspersions on the parents because I don't know. Yeah. But one I could think is that they talked to Joshua and they came to believe his side of it. He was convincing and a good kid, sometimes that could be it. But the second just could be honor, which is if your daughter is missing anyway and all the investigations in the world have yielded her disappeared, you don't really want to, get the world talking about her affair with Joshua or any sexual interactions there, and so might as well, just believe the drowning. But I have no idea.
So the second theory is something that no one's ever publicly discussed. It's not common at all. There Aryaan putting it out there for the world to think. But that's just not how her parents come across in the conversations they're having, in the statement they release where they want her to be declared dead. That's not what they're saying. The Joshua belief theory is a little more likely, with Sudiksha's mother even hugging Joshua saying he hopes she's found. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the most promising reason, the most prominent one given by legal scholars, again, not by Sudiksha's parents, are different, and we'll just get into those.
Oh my God, don't... Okay, fine, I'll wait.
So, in a news conference outside their home in South Riding, Sudiksha Konanki, his voice breaking, said, quote, "It is with deep sadness and a heavy heart that we are coming to terms with the fact that our daughter has drowned," end quote. His wife, Sridevi, sobbed beside him. The family said they needed closure and asked for privacy while they cared for their younger children. "Our heart is broken," Sudiksha's father told reporters. They urged people to pray for their daughter and for a swift end to the ordeal. Sheriff Mike Chapman of Loudoun County released a statement saying his office would support the family in, quote, "every way possible," but noted that the final decision rested with Dominican authorities. Now, I think this decision to ask for her to be declared dead so soon into an investigation needs some explaining because of how much confusion, conjecture, and rumors it caused online. For starters, declaring a person dead in the Dominican Republic without a body is not straightforward. Under the country's civil code, a declaration of legal absence can only be sought after 4 years of a disappearance, and a declaration of death is only granted 1 year after that request. In Virginia, the law requires 7 years to presume a missing person dead, unless the disappearance occurred in a foreign country and the US Department of State issues a report of presumptive death. So people are justified in saying that this was a peculiar request that is at odds with what most legal situations allow for.
Not just legal situations allow for, just what most parents do in all the disappearing cases we've covered.
And how much time investigations need in general. 12 days is just not it.
Forget that. Just think if you're a parent, and again, I don't know what their motivations are, so I can't speak for being in that situation.
Yeah.
But you would want authorities to keep immersing resources for as long as possible. In fact, in the cases that we have covered, like a Tej Chitnis case or the other disappearance cases, parents fight for the investigation to not be closed.
This argument still applies to what they've done, and we'll just get into that in a second.
Oh my God, just get to it.
I know, we're getting to it. So, the most widely accepted theory behind why they did this is that the Konanki family hoped that an official declaration would allow them to begin grieving and address practical matters like property and financial affairs. Added to this was the fact that, according to reports, Sudiksha's parents told Dominican police that they recognized there was, quote, "no suspicion of foul play in their daughter's presumed death," and that they were willing to comply with any legal formalities. Legal experts note such declarations are pragmatic. Without a death certificate, families may never be able to access bank accounts, insurance policies, or scholarship funds. But Pittsburgh attorney Phil DiLucente offered another perspective. He suggested that the family's request was a strategic move, possibly at the recommendation of counsel. Declaring a person dead shifts an investigation's focus from search and rescue to determining responsibility. Quote, "They want to make sure that all the rescue and efforts and capital and all the money that is being put into this investigation be focused on who did this to my child," end quote. DiLucente added that such declarations are often necessary for insurance or estate purposes. Virginia's 7-year presumption period can be shortened if the State Department issues a presumptive death when a person vanishes abroad. In his view, the Konankis' petition signaled their acceptance that Sudiksha was unlikely to be found alive and their desire to pivot resources towards accountability.
How old is this girl?
20.
So what property or estate or bank balance can she have that would require settling within 12 days?
Is it possible that there were scholarship funds, which is the thing that I can think of? There were education funds, scholarship funds that had been set aside for Sudiksha in her name that can only be accessed by the family now. Again, these are details we don't know. This is pure speculation.
I don't understand.
But there are some wealthy Indian American families. We don't know sort of the socioeconomic.
Yeah, I'll be curious to understand what kind of financial situation the Konankis would be in. But the fact that the daughter is going to an amazing university, the fact that she is doing spring break in Punta Cana, which is not cheap by any fetch of the imagination.
But most of these students earn themselves and do this
I know,
themselves.
but it's not coming off as somebody who's in financial straits. Again, this is based on the cursory information I have. I just think 12 days for that specific motivation of requiring access to funds and insurance of your 20-year-old daughter are a little far-fetched, and I don't think the parents would be doing that. I think the latter bit of this by the...
Shifting responsibility.
Shifting responsibility and focusing the search on who did it might make more sense, but I can totally see why this was fuel for rumors.
Absolutely.
Because I'm also not sure of
none
why
of these
what's
answers
happening is
perfectly
happening.
fit. Like Aryaan said, that first answer of insurance, bank accounts, is that the other does. Still, even if that's true, even if that explanation fits, it doesn't quite sit right with a lot of people. So there is no clear-cut answer here, only legal commentators saying why in such a situation someone is likely to do something like this. Despite what the parents believed though, a small but vocal contingent online insisted the case should not be closed as a drowning. They pointed to the power outage at the resort earlier that week, speculating that criminals might have taken advantage of the dark to target tourists. In that time period, the resort relied on generators to keep only essential systems running. Lights flickered, some cameras lost resolution. Was there an intruder who exploited the darkness? There is no evidence of it, but the blackout fueled speculation. This group of people also noted that despite intensive searches, no trace of her body had been found, not even a piece of clothing or jewelry beyond what she had left on the beach bed. On June 10th, Sheriff Chapman from Virginia publicly urged Dominican authorities to share all evidence with his office, including data from Joshua Ribe's cell phone and any text messages he sent after Sudiksha disappeared. The request hinted at lingering frustration with the investigation's secrecy and how much was being hidden from the public. The message the sheriff was trying to send to the Dominican authorities was that without transparency, rumors continue to thrive. While investigators waited whether to treat the disappearance as an accident or a crime, Sudiksha's friends grappled with survivor's guilt. "We should have stayed," one told a journalist privately. They replayed that night in their minds, wondering whether they could have prevented what happened. One remembered Sudiksha standing at the water's edge, laughing as she looked up at the stars. Another recalled she had been the first to suggest going back to the bar. Perhaps if they had listened, she would be home. In messages shared anonymously, some have expressed anger that early stories focused on Joshua rather than their missing friend. They also fear the judgment of those who think they didn't do enough. Online sleuths have dissected their social media profiles and speculated about their actions. In the age of viral true crime, there is little distinction between seeking justice and voyeuristic fixation. Yet what stings most are those memories of Sudiksha from that evening, haunting them as they return to campus, where Sudiksha's empty seat in organic chemistry served as a daily reminder of her absence. All this while, Joshua was going through a journey of his own back in the US after being released from house arrest. That release angered many on social media who believed he knew more than he was saying. People flooded his social accounts with accusations. His parents released a statement expressing sympathy for Sudiksha's family and emphasizing that their son was cooperating. They noted that he had been interviewed multiple times, had his passport confiscated, and been held in the Dominican Republic for over a week, and they hoped that public speculation would not hinder the investigation. Yet, even if his account is accurate, he will likely live forever with the knowledge that someone disappeared while in his care. In his statements, he acknowledged the weight of that responsibility. He said he met with Sudiksha's mother when she visited Punta Cana. She hugged him and thanked him for trying to save her daughter. He told reporters he hoped she would be found. Meanwhile, the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office continued to list Joshua as a person of interest, a designation without legal weight, but one that highlighted the unresolved questions that stemmed from his changing accounts of those moments.
I know we are casting aspersions on the last person because of the last person theory and rumors exist, but again, just devil's advocate here. I'm not even sure if I fully believe what I'm saying, but the fact is that this man had no reasonable motive to kill somebody.
That's right.
And I think that needs to be at the back of our minds when we are castigating one person as suspect number one, is that what is this guy's motive?
Yeah.
Right? From all the footage available, from all the accounts of this man from her friends that are there, nothing negative has been said.
That's right.
And so while his testimony might vary, for which I've enlisted a few reasons other than malintention, which could be you are both drunk, it's late in the night, and you have kind of drowned, your memory can be hazy. And that, I the motives I can think of are, they, like, he might have assaulted her.
Yeah, and there was a struggle.
There was a struggle.
That's what I can think of as well.
That is the one. But again, to come up with that motive requires us to take a big leap that is hypothetical, and without evidence, I can see how it could be troubling for...
Also, I will say, it seems like the ocean is such a vast space. It's a little bit uncommon for a body to not show up at all in a coastal country which has the coast inhabited all along the way.
Good point.
That's not how it works. Even in the Chauhan family murder, months later, bodies dispersed all over water bodies in the UK kept re-emerging, over and over again.
Yeah.
So this is not incredibly common that she could have drowned.
And again, I'm just putting out these theories back to the Bahamas, but there were at least twice a day we couldn't enter the beach because there was a shark spotted.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, this is the Atlantic.
Yeah, these are
sharks
possibilities.
are common. What if that was one of the... So, I mean, I'm just putting it out. Maybe sharks don't eat corpses. I don't know. But, yeah, there's just so much, there's so many possibilities so little to go off of. My mind's just running places right now.
Yeah. So that was what was happening in Joshua's life. Carter Johnson, the other man on the beach that night, has remained largely out of public eye. According to Spanish media, he left the beach at the same time as the 5 women, was questioned later on, and his involvement was ruled out. There is no evidence he played any role in Sudiksha's disappearance, yet he too faces online suspicions simply because he was there. Slowly, 12 days turned into weeks, which turned into months, yet no sign of Sudiksha turned up. The absence of a body left investigators with 2 broad possibilities. Sudiksha drowned and her body was swept away to sea, or she met with foul play. Each theory has supporting details and glaring holes, with neither quite making complete sense. Other fringe theories also exist in the corners of the internet, and while they are unlikely, we have covered cases like them before. Some propose that Sudiksha decided to run away, overwhelmed by academic pressure. But those who knew her reject this outright. She had a close relationship with her family and a clear plan for the future. Others wondered if she suffered a medical emergency unrelated to drowning. Could she have fallen, hit her head, and been carried out by the tide? Again, without a body or witness, these possibilities remain speculative. What is known for sure, though, is that Sudiksha's disappearance resonates because it fits into a troubling pattern. Young women vanishing while on vacation abroad. 20 years ago, Natalie Holloway disappeared in Aruba under eerily similar circumstances. She was last seen leaving a bar with a local man and was never found. In 2009, Brittany Drexel, a 17-year-old from New York, disappeared during a spring break trip in Myrtle Beach. Like Sudiksha, Brittany was initially assumed to have drowned until evidence emerged that she had been kidnapped and murdered. The spring of 2025 witnessed another eerily similar case when Dorian Christian MacDonald, a 38-year-old Canadian tourist, vanished under eerily similar circumstances in the Dominican Republic. MacDonald was on a solo vacation in Puerto Plata, on the island's north coast. According to news reports, he went for a late-night walk along Maimon Bay around 2 a.m. on June 20th, and his body was discovered washed ashore at around 4:15 a.m. Friends and family described his death as a, quote, drowning accident, noting that he had been walking alone on the beach when he went missing. The Dominican Civil Defense Agency said first responders were called at 3 a.m. and his body was found more than an hour later. Unlike Sudiksha, his fate was quickly confirmed. Yet his story added to growing unease about the safety of Caribbean resorts and the adequacy of emergency responses. These cases highlight both the vulnerability of travelers and the challenges of cross-border investigations. Jurisdictional obstacles, language barriers, and differing legal standards can delay or derail justice. This October 6, 2025 would mark 7 months to the day Sudiksha disappeared. She is still missing and has not been legally declared dead. The search continues on Dominican soil, but leads have grown cold as no major breakthroughs have been announced for months now. The Interpol Yellow Notice remains active today, yet each day the possibility of finding her deceased increases. Still, some search teams on grounds have refused to quit. Quote, even if it's just for her family's peace, we will keep looking, one officer told reporters. For many of those searchers, the case became personal, a chance to show that a visitor to their country would not be forgotten. In smaller areas of the Dominican Republic, local fishermen talk about Sudiksha's name as they mend their nets. Some whisper superstitions about the sea claiming those who anger its spirits. In Washington, D.C., members of the Indian diaspora step out to push for greater accountability from the Dominican government. They organize rallies outside the State Department, chanting her name and carrying signs that read, "Bring Sudiksha home." In New Delhi, relatives who had never met her gather for prayer vigils occasionally, lighting oil lamps and reciting mantras in Telugu. In these months, Sudiksha's families cycle through hope and despair. Quote, every morning I wake up and pray she walks through that door, her mother once said to a family friend. But she also confessed that she has begun imagining what Sudiksha looks like as a ghost, walking along the same beach where she vanished. Her father, a software engineer who once prided himself on logical thinking, now flips between stoicism and bursts of tears. He insists on cooking her favorite dishes on her birthday. He refuses to change the welcome mat she purchased for their home. He spends hours reading about tidal patterns, convinced that if he understands the ocean, he might understand what happened to his daughter. Her younger siblings begged their parents to keep her bedroom exactly as she'd left it. That bedroom in Virginia still holds her medical textbooks and dance costumes. Her younger brother leaves her desk lamp on at night, afraid she will come home to a dark room. At the University of Pittsburgh, students hung candles and photos on the steps of the Cathedral of Learning. Professors have dedicated research papers to her memory. A professor who wrote her recommendation letter for medical school wept on live television. She had been, he said, one of the brightest students he'd taught. On social media, hashtags demanding justice occasionally trend, then fade, replaced by new tragedies. For now, the case sits in an uneasy limbo. The 4-year legal absence requirement means that an official death certificate may not be issued until 2029. In Virginia, like I said, it's 7 years. That means Sudiksha's family could wait the better part of a decade for formal closure. Meanwhile, they face financial and legal hurdles. Insurance policies cannot be paid out, bank accounts cannot be closed, and a university cannot formally confer her degree. The case has become a cautionary tale whispered by parents to their college-aged children. Be careful on spring break, stay with your group, don't go out alone. Universities across the United States have revisited their guidance on study abroad and spring break trips, emphasizing the importance of reporting missing roommates immediately. But this isn't just a cautionary tale. This is the story of someone's life. At the heart of this case is a young woman who loved science and Bollywood music, who dreamed of donning a white coat and a stethoscope, who had 2 little siblings who adored her. She is a daughter, a sister, a friend. In honoring her memory, we are reminded to hold our loved ones close, to offer help when someone expresses distress, and to advocate for safety and accountability in all the places we seek escape. If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Karak Merch. Keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.